Alright, so now you learned about the history of the Iowa in the last video. Now it's time to take a look at what the ship actually looks like in game. So keep in mind what mods we're running here. We're running AA guns, we're running propulsion, we're running target acquisition, we're running artillery plotting room, which is really, if you're playing any tier 7 American battleship, is what that's what the mod that you want to be running is. As long as all the 3 basic mods that come in pretty much every battleship's package. Keep in mind that I'm also using a commander of basically no battleship relevance. I'm actually put a carrier commander on here just to show you the base stats of Iowa. So keep in mind that this is without a good commander. So this is the bare bones stats. So first up, survivability. Your HP is pretty decent. It comes in is slightly above average of all the tier 7 battleships. You will get beat by the regeneration capabilities of the British, as long as the really tanky armor of the Germans. You will find yourself in competition with those, struggling to see who can survive the longest, but you are still more tanky and more survivable than the French battleships like Richelieu or Jean Bart, or quite honestly even the Russian battleships. Even though they have more health, those things are like floating citadels. So the armor, we'll get to that in a minute. Torpedo damage reduction is 25%, which is below average. That's pretty poor. And the Iowa is not good. Combined with this, and combined with a poor maneuverability, which we'll get to, the Iowa is not suited for those, close quarter torpedo encounters with destroyers that you get into. They can't take torpedoes well at all. So keep that in mind. The artillery, you get the main battery, you get the standard American 16-inch at the tier. You get 3 turrets of 3 guns each. You have a firing range, a base firing range of 18.2 kilometers, which is very, very good. That's one of the Iowa's main strengths, is that its range is above average than most ships at its tier. The reload time is about 30 seconds. Which for American battleships is pretty average. For anyone else, that's really, really slow. But if you've already played American battleships and are a fan of them, like me, you won't really be deterred by 30 seconds at all. The turn time, 180 degrees, is 45 seconds, which is very bad. But there is the play style of Iowa really kind of negates that fact of the turn time. So keep in mind that 45 seconds is bad, but it doesn't necessarily matter in the case of how you play the ship. HE shell damage, you get a maximum HE shell damage of 5,700, excuse me, which is average. That's in the middle. Again, obviously you won't beat the British, or even the Japanese has better HE damage than you, and you get a 36% chance to set fires, which is again average. Those two things are more than enough to handle destroyers decently well. However, the main type of shell that you want to be firing out of really any American battleship is the AP, which the AP shell damage is 1,300, which is really good. That's slightly above average for the tier. You will see a lot of battleships that have 11,000, 12,000 AP damage. So I was about 1,000 more damage per AP shell. If you have a fully equipped or fully upgraded Sims like me, you can get that AP damage up to about 1,480, I think, if I'm not mistaken, which is really high. That's really good for any ship, but especially the American ones for sure. The secondary armament is it's decent. It's nothing really to be proud of. I mean, they're you know, they're okay. Standard American 5-inch, and they're good enough. They're accurate, but they're never. With the Iowa, you're never really going to be, you know, in close enough range to even really use your secondaries that often. The Iowa is not one of those kind of brawling battleships like Massachusetts is, where you get in super close and that's how you get all your damage. The Iowa tends to want to stay at a distance and utilize that very, very good range that it has. So while the South Dakotas, like the Alabama and the Massachusetts, speed up on ahead to take on the enemy in a very aggressive way, close up, guns blazing. Iowa tends to be a little bit for the more methodical players who like to kind of hang back and you know, analyze the, you know, context of the situation, you know, what the map looks like, what, you know, what the enemies around them are. Those tend to be the Iowa players. AA defense is extremely good, especially if, you know, with that mod, that really helps. But even as a base trait, without that mod, it's still excellent. It's still pretty much the best of its tier, and you won't get pestered by you won't get pestered by carriers that often. You will get pestered by destroyers a lot, unfortunately, in this thing. Maneuverability is really where the Iowa lacks. This is the ship's weak spot. You do get a fast speed of 31 knots, which is, for American players, that is basically like supersonic. If you're a French or German player, that's pretty average. So in terms of battleships of all countries, that's a pretty average speed. In terms of American battleships, that is lightning fast, especially if you grinded to the Iowa. In ships like the New Mexico or Colorado, like I have, you can really, really tell the difference immediately, you know, in your first game in the ship. And that's one of the reasons that people grind to Iowa a lot, is because they actually want a fast American battleship. And Iowa is one of those few fast American battleships that actually exists in game. Turning circle radius is very horrible. 920 meters is awful. Pretty much anything at the tier is better than that. And that's really due to the fact that since Iowa is so long, it has a really hard time making those sudden and tight turns, like, you know, some of the other ships can do really well. And also the rudder shift time is atrocious as well. So keep that in mind. Detectability, you know, concealment is, you know, not that great, but it's a battleship, so who really cares except for the first 1 or 2 minutes of the game if you're trying to reposition yourself on the map. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. So the armor on this ship, the strongest part of your ship is going to be the bow armor. That is the 29 to 30 millimeter yellow portion of the front of the ship. That can pretty much deflect anything 15 inches or below. So the Bismarck, the V Veneto, the Brandenburg, the Odin, I believe all of those are under 15 inches or under. So anything that just just completely deflects off the bow, doesn't even penetrate. 16 inches will have, you know, occasionally have the chance of penetrating pretty well, but even then, I haven't really gotten too heavily punched by 16-inch shells in the Iowa in terms of the bow armor. The Citadel is slightly above water, and it is very, very vulnerable, not in the necessarily depth that it's at, but just the length. It is an extremely long citadel because Iowa is an extremely long ship. So if you do happen to be broadside in this thing, and the, you know, guy who's firing at you gets reasonable RNG, and he should have no problem really hitting that citadel, which is why we'll kind of talk about this in a second, but that's why you don't play the Iowa broadside. You do have a pretty heavily built up superstructure, which does make you a little bit more susceptible to HE cruisers. That gives them a lot more target to shoot at, so you are more susceptible to catching on fire. Keep that in mind. The side armor of the Iowa is the green portion, the 25 to 26 millimeters, is definitely a weak spot of the ship. So that combined with the astonishingly easy to hit citadel really makes the Iowa very vulnerable and weak at a broadside angle of approach. So how do you play Iowa? There's a couple of things that you have to realize, and there's a couple of things that you have to utilize. The first and foremost thing, the most important thing about playing the Iowa is that you want to utilize that fantastic bow armor. A lot of people underconsider or underrate Iowa's bow armor and its ability to basically tank shots from head-on, like a head-on, bow-on position towards its enemy. If you go bow-on in the Iowa, you will not get damaged very easily by a huge number of enemy shells. You're just not going to take as much damage because that bow armor is so strong. It either deflects a lot of stuff or soaks it up very well to keep it from reaching into the citadel. And it also just poses, if you are also narrow coming at an enemy like this, you are also a harder target to hit. For whatever reason, I play tier 7 on a regular basis, and it seems like most Iowa players, they go broadside, and I don't exactly know why. It might be due to the fact that they don't know a single thing that they are doing. It might be because they don't care that much. It might just be, be because they think it'll... I honestly have no idea why people play Iowa broadside. The only plausible explanation that I can come up with in my mind is to get that third turret in there, because when people like me and like other decent people in the game, I'm not gonna say amazing, but even decent people in the game like me realize that Iowa is extremely susceptible to going broadside, and because of that weak side armor, you can see that green armor that's highlighted right now, and because of that long and easy to hit citadel, makes Iowa very, very susceptible at a broadside angle. And a lot of people still really ignore this fact by just trying to go full broadside and just get that third gun in there. They're very tempted to have a full broadside salvo. But I will say that if you utilize that bow armor and you go bow on towards your enemy, a lot of the damage, I would say about 80 to 90% of your damage is going to come from those two front guns. And the accuracy, I forgot to mention this earlier, but the accuracy on the guns is excellent for its tier. It's another one of the things that makes American battleships, and for that matter Iowa, stand out among the rest, is that the guns have incredible dispersion and accuracy. So usually where you end up pointing the shot, that's where it's going to end up. And then also you have that above average AP shell damage that other countries don't have. You have that strong American AP. So combined with these two facts, it is perfectly reasonable to just use your two front guns. A lot of people might be tempted to use that third gun to get an extra, 6,000-7,000 damage. But if you are weighing 6,000 or 7,000 damage, or losing 30,000 damage by then going broadside to get that third gun in there. It's really there's really no like benefit there. It doesn't equal out. So always remember to, in the Iowa, remember to go bow first. I promise you that two guns, 2/3 of your firepower is definitely enough, just because they are super accurate and they are not shy about hitting extremely hard as well. So that being said, play the Iowa bow first. Don't be one of those Iowa players that plays it broadside. That drives me crazy because it's basically free damage. The other thing about the Iowa, moving right along, the other thing is that it has very, very good range, and I talked about this earlier, mentioning the artillery and the firepower. So Iowa does have very, very good range. Depending on what level your commander is, you can get your range up to anywhere from 18.4 to 18.7 kilometers, which is really, really good. That's above average, and a lot of times you will find other battleships not being able to shoot at you, but you can still shoot at them. A lot of times you can shoot at battleships before they see you and even come into your detectability range. So you can get shots off from very far away, and the shells still remain accurate from long distances. So you can get those nice, those sweet, sweet citadels from super, super far away. It does allow you to do that. That being said, a lot of Iowa players are very passive. They figure that with their long range, they don't really have to enter the fight that well, or that much, and they can just keep on punishing and utilizing their above average range to knock out enemy targets from afar. And while that's a perfectly valid strategy for a lot of the time that you play this ship, that's not always the case of what you want to do. You want to push up with your teammates whenever needed. If they're requesting you to take out a certain target that requires you to move up, a couple islands, or maybe it's a zone that needs to be capped, whatever that may be, don't hesitate to move up and actually play the Iowa at a fair distance. I'm not going to say rush in and play Iowa up close to everybody like you can in Massachusetts or Alabama, because it really doesn't work with this ship. The turret traverses are really bad. And you have that kind of weak armor, and you can't dodge torpedoes and stuff like that as well. So I was more for sitting back, but not too far back, but sitting back and helping your team push forward. That's really what you want to be doing in this ship. So it does have very, very good range that enables you to get shots off from distances that your teammates and the enemy might not be able to reach. So that is a really handy thing about Iowa. Those are really the two big things, and I will read you the loadout that I normally use actually. So I run the damage control party, obviously. Everybody gets that. The repair party, you get 3 of those. The HP per second is pretty average. Nothing to really sneeze at there. And then I run the spotter plane. You can run the fighter aircraft, but since your AA guns are already so good, there's really no point in running that additional fighter aircraft. There's really no reason to. And the secondary armament, you're not going to really be brawling up close in Iowa. So having your secondary boosters is not really worth it at all. Long reach, you do have above average main battery range. We talked about that. You can end up hitting enemies before they can hit you, or come into your detectability range, which is very nice. And the guns do respond well to long distances. They are fairly accurate at super long distances. Not the most accurate in the world, but they are for 18 kilometers. They're, let's just say they're more accurate at 18 kilometers than other ships at the tier. Fast, you do have above average maximum moving speed, slightly above average, but don't think that you're the fastest ship in the game. That really kind of belongs to the French, and they're like Richelieu and Champagne and Jean Bart and all that. And the big guns, the ship is armed with high caliber main battery guns, which is true. 16-inch is pretty average for the tier. The guns are very accurate, and they do not really hesitate to penetrate most ships, depending, it doesn't really matter that much which angle the ship is at. The shells, as long as you know where to aim, should have no problem penetrating wherever you need them to go. So that is the Iowa. Just a quick recap, the things that you want to utilize are your fantastic bow armor. You want to go bow in towards most ships, and you'll see even in the video that basically 99% of the time I'm going bow in, just using my first two guns, which is perfectly fine. You're gonna get a lot of damage as it is with just your two front guns, I promise. Going bow in towards your enemy, not really giving them any chance or opportunity to fire at your side armor. And the other thing to recap is the range. You do have very, very, very good range that you can utilize to your advantage, but just don't punish the fact that you have one of the best ranges at tier 7 in the game. I think it might be the best range for a standard tier 7 battleship. I'll have to double check. So don't punish that ability. Still, push up with your team when need be. But you do still want to keep, even though you push up, you still want to keep that distance from the enemy. You don't want to get in too close. The ship suffers dramatically when it's put up into close quarters situations. So you want to have a little bit more tactical feel to this ship. Sit back a little bit, be more aware of what your surroundings, and basically just get repeated shots off with your accurate front two guns. That's pretty much how you play the Iowa. If there's an HE cruiser backup, if there's a destroyer, hopefully your team has enough common sense to actually push up and either pressure the destroyer away from you or just simply outright sink it. The good news is that even though you can't dodge torpedoes that well because your maneuverability is just really bad, if you do play the Iowa right, you will be facing bow on towards any threat. So a lot of those torpedoes will only hit you once or twice because it is a pretty skinny ship. So no torpedo salvo will slam into you fully. At least that's the idea. And that is the USS Iowa. That is probably I would say probably the most popular battleship, honestly, at tier 7. I see this thing played quite a bit compared to the Bismarck and the Amagi and the German premium ships like the Brandenburg and the French. I do see this thing played quite often. Too much of it broadside, actually. It really is free damage when it goes broadside. But anyways, I've talked enough. It's time to get to the gameplay now. Let me know what you guys thought of this video and what you should do for my next video. I was probably thinking a destroyer video or a cruiser video because I've done 3 battleship videos in a row now. I wasn't planning on actually doing the Iowa, but since I am touring the New Jersey in a couple days, I figured that it's, this is as good a time as any. I will get that New Jersey video up for you guys, that tour, probably right after I post these series of Iowa videos. So keep a lookout for that. I know you guys really enjoyed that last time. That would seem to be my most popular video on the channel. So keep an eye out for that. That's special. I plan to do probably the Akatsuki next, some sort of tier 6, maybe tier 5 destroyer, or maybe a cruiser. We'll see. But most likely the Akatsuki, since that seems to be another ship that is played very, very, very abundantly. So yeah, that covers the USS Iowa, and thank you guys for watching.